Okay, so this is going to be another short video, just looking at how to remove and then reinstall a mil-spec trigger. And I know what you're thinking, but just a minute ago, didn't you have the Blitz trigger in? I did, and I went through the hassle of taking it out just so that I could show you this, and then I'm going to somewhat laughably try and reinstall that on camera next. But for the time being, mil-spec trigger, very simple operation. We are just removing these two pins and then pulling out the trigger, the disconnector, the hammer, the disconnector, and the trigger piece. So it's worth remembering that all of these parts are under a degree of spring tension. So even once the hammer is dropped, it's worth keeping a hold on it so that once those pins drop free, you can gently lift it out rather than having it firing off across your desk. So there's our hammer and our hammer pin. Next is the trigger piece and disconnector. So there's our disconnector and there's the pin. So it's worth noting that some people say you need to completely remove the safety to get the trigger out. That's not the case. However, there are some caveats to that. So it depends on the trigger piece that you have, how far you need to go with disassembly to remove. So this is the trigger piece that I took out of the LANTAC originally. And you can see that this corner here has some rounding to it. And what that rounding allows for is for that trigger piece to slip out from underneath the safety while it's in situ, and that's whether it's in fire or safe. The trigger that I've got in here for this demonstration is a Strike Industries trigger, which instead of having the round edges has a solid kind of monolith style build to it. So you can't remove it with the trigger in with the safety in either the fire or safe position. However, you don't have to remove it entirely. You just need to take out the detent assembly for the safety to allow it to rotate 180 degrees. And what that rotation allows for is the cutout in the safety assembly that allows the weapon to fire once it's pulled all the way through its range of motion, will actually provide ample space for the trigger to lift out. So I don't know if you'll be able to see, but this is on safe, this is on fire, and then if we pull all the way around to what in a better world would be full auto, you've got that nice big gap. And with that gap exposed, this can pull forward, up, and you can lift your trigger piece out completely. And if we look at them side by side, you can see the difference in the way that these two pieces are constructed and just how much of an impact that small piece of rounding off has on the complexity of disassembling your rifle. So the next thing to do is to put it back together. Now you can reinstall a trigger piece like this with the safety in situ in either the fire or safe position. Well, just the safe position, but I'll get to that. So I'll show you that just for reference. So first things first, we're going to replace our grip assembly and our safety detent and have all the fun of trying to get the grip bolt to drop into place. Nothing's ever easy, is it? I'm just going to cheat. There we go. Just pretend that I bothered to edit that out. Right, so once this is tightened down, just for reference, I will show you this piece dropping in. So even in either safe or fire, this style of trigger piece has enough room in it to drop clean in, and also to drop out. Whereas with the Strike Industries more solid build type, we need to have the safety selector in safe, drop the trigger piece into the receiver hole, and then just with a small amount of downward pressure, we should be able to get the trigger piece to, there we go, to slide under the safety and go in like that. Arguably, it is easier to just do it without having the safety detent in place, but I just wanted to show you how that works. So the next thing we do is replace the disconnector. The cutout in the disconnector goes over the spring at the back of the trigger assembly, and then we're just pushing it down until the holes all line up, and that pin can just slide home nice and easy. And then again, a little bit of downward pressure to make sure that the other side of the trigger piece is lined up with the receiver. Now the next part, and where people, certainly me the first few times I tried to do this, get confused, is which way around the spring goes against the hammer. So the back of your spring is against the back of the hammer, and the power that's driving the hammer forward to fire comes from these spring legs being arched backwards and the hammer releasing. So the way that's working is both of these pins have these two recesses, and they can go in either way around. But what's important is that in the trigger piece assembly, the recess here is still sticking out of the inside of the receiver, and your spring leg is going to lock against that recess. And that's what's holding your hammer spring in place. Now, to get the hammer in more easily, put the safety onto fire, and that will allow the spring, the trigger plate to move. And you will then find it a lot easier to manipulate the hammer into position against that spring tension to be able to drop your pin in, like so. And then it's just a question of getting it lined up correctly against the receiver on the other side so that you can push that pin back through. So reinstalling the pins, depending how tight the tolerances are in your receiver, can normally be done by hand. And that is your mil-spec trigger, disassembled and reassembled.